You can find the product featured in today's video and many more at Dan's Dinosaurs. Check out his site at the link in the description below, and be sure to mention that Killershrewfan sent you. Now, on to the review. Hello everyone, and welcome back to yet another PNSO dinosaur figure review video. I'm not even halfway through reviewing all of their recent releases, and it'll be any day now that they start up again with their weekly reveals for God knows how long. So I'm gonna keep plugging away with these reviews, with today's subject being, of course, Achi, the Sinoceratops. Sinoceratops is certainly popular at the moment, due in no small part to Jurassic World Fallen Kingdom and the widespread success of Camp Cretaceous. PNSO was probably all too happy to get in on the hype, so much so that Achi here is actually the second Sinoceratops they have given us in the year of 2020. The first, of course, being the baby Sinoceratops with the same name. They would go on to produce this fully grown model several months later, so perhaps PNSO have been giving their dinosaurs an accelerated growth gene like Henry Wu did in Jurassic World. But perhaps I shouldn't be too cynical. After all, PNSO is based in China, and with Sinoceratops being the only ceratopsid from China, it only seems fitting that they should tackle it at some point or other. Regardless, it is a neat idea to have a sort of growth cycle element to your display, and because of that, I was quite excited to see that PNSO had a grown-up version of Achi on the way. But the whole novelty of that idea aside, how does this Sinoceratops hold up on its own? Well, let's find out. But first, the packaging. Same old here, with a glamour shot of Achi adorning both sides of the packaging, framed beautifully against a blank white background. On the top left corner, you can see the PNSO logo in Chinese on one side and an English translation on the other. Achi here is number 40 in the ever-growing PNSO lineup. Then on the top, you've got another angle of the Paintmaster next to the logo once again, alongside the company tagline, "Every life deserves respect." And yeah, that's the packaging. There is, of course, a booklet, but I forgot to film a clip of it, so we'll have to do without. It's the same thing as always though, an introduction to PNSO along with a skeletal diagram of Sinoceratops and a child-friendly story about Achi, even though I still have a hard time believing these things are designed for kids. But with the packaging out of the way, we can finally take a look at this figure, and I gotta say, first impressions of this one are quite strong. I am absolutely delighted by the posture and presentation of it. Sure, it may be a cash-in, but it is a pretty cool looking cash-in, and that's what's important. Let's go ahead and take a closer look at this figure, starting as always with the head. So, taking a look at the head, you can see there is an absolute ton of detail on the face of Achi, with scales of varying sizes adorning the entire surface area. One thing I absolutely love about the detail on the head here is this sort of rugosity on the top of the snout around the base of the nasal horn. That treatment is quite nice. I appreciate the attention to detail on the beak with the keratinous ridges, and those flaring nostrils look great. Really puts you in mind of a bull or other such appropriate animal. Taking a look at the frill, easily the most eye-catching area of this model, the first thing you notice would be those vibrant patterns. No unnecessary holes in the head of this guy. Instead, you have those striking presentations of black, white, orange, red, and green. Although it does look distinctly painted on, it's such a lovely use of color that I find myself not even caring. You can see along the top of the frill you have got those 10 downward curved horns, which have been treated with darker colors that gradiate to a cream coloration the further you get from the base. On the side of the frill you've got these sort of double-pronged horns, which is certainly an interesting choice, puts me in mind of the horns of eastern dragons. Then of course the scale detail on the frill and top of the head looks incredible. I do have a couple key issues with the head of this figure. First up, and possibly most glaringly distracting, would be the high levels of gloss used on the face. Perhaps the intent was to highlight the more keratinous areas, but it looks like they got a little trigger happy with it. And now Achi is left with a very oily complexion. Another thing that doesn't really work for me would be the eyes. You can see they're painted with a flat orange orange color and black pupil with a black ring around the edges. I don't know why, but for some reason these eyes just don't work for me. They somehow manage to be both flat and cartoony at the same time. Not at all like the wonderful lifelike eyes we've seen on some of their theropods. And as a final note, there are some areas on the head, most prominently on the lower jaw there, where the scale detail looks like it's just running together, like we're already getting some mold fatigue, even though this is a new figure. Those three issues aside, I think this is another wonderful head sculpt from PNSO, and the treatment of the frill display makes for a very striking focal point. Moving on from the head of this figure and down the body, you can see all of these lovely wrinkles in the neck as the head cranes over the right shoulder. Then of course you've got some beautiful buckling skin on the midsection as the right leg pushes the skin into the torso of the animal. All of these lovely details have been adorned with scales of varying shapes and sizes, with the standard large ceratopsian scales sprinkled throughout. All of that detail continues down the slightly curved tail and then back up the other side, where you can see some lovely sagging skin hanging down against the bracing left leg and folding up around the shoulder blade. Again, you have got some lovely neck details as Achi cranes his head upwards and the skin in the neck wrinkles and buckles with that movement. Then on the back of the frill, you can see all of the amazing uneven scale work that's been done to cover the remaining surface area. The limbs of this Sinoceratops are appropriately beefy, sporting some lovely muscle tones and skin details around the knees and elbows as Achi stands in a sort of squat position. It really sells the look of a robust, low-slung animal. The toe claws have a sort of yellowed cream tone to them, and I love the darker coloration on the backs of the toes there. Really gives them a lived-in, dirty appearance, like Achi has been roaming around through the muck. Now, if we move along the underbelly, you can get a look at the treatment of the beak and see the musculature in the lower jaw, as well as the lovely work on the gullet. The shoulder muscles of Achi are particularly well pronounced around the pectorals there, which really helps to emphasize the posture. The scale work down here is more rectangular in nature, and you can see some more wrinkles and stretching skin around the limbs, highlighted by a sort of rusty orange coloration. The PNSO logo can be found on the underbelly. Then at the base of the tail, you have got a cloaca slit. Now, unfortunately, you have got a noticeable seam line on this figure that runs around the base of the entire skull. That one negative element aside, I think this is another home run on PNSO's part in terms of sculpture. The detail work is all very well done, and in general, I love how powerful and stocky the build of the figure is. That element is emphasized by its pose. Like I said, it has this sort of squat appearance, but the rutting posture it's in with the head swinging over the right shoulder, brandishing that nasal horn, feels so fitting for this particular dinosaur. It's a pose I don't think I've seen before, and it really ties the whole thing together in my eyes, giving it a proud, confident, and striking appearance, which fits well with those flashy frill colors. As far as the paint job goes, it's hard to ignore the similarities between it and the Jurassic World counterpart, with the mostly green tones and splash of color on the frill. That being said, it's all well applied, and the transition between colors on the midsection is particularly nice, with the green giving way to that orange coloration and cream of the underbelly. That same orange appears to have been used as a wash to help the details all pop and come to life, which is a nice touch. A lot better than just some disparate dark paint thrown on. If you move along the dorsal region, you can see some very subtle darker green banding providing some breakup. It's probably one of the most subtle color schemes to come from PNSO so far, and I am definitely here for it. Unfortunately, mine came with some paint wear right out of the box, and I have noticed other areas with little chips or scuffs in the paint. None of it is anything major, really only noticeable on close inspection, but it's enough to get my OCD going and makes me feel like I should warn you that this paint job might not be the most durable out there. Now for some measurements. A straight measurement from tip of tail to tip of snout puts Achi in at around 6 inches or around 15 centimeters, but if you actually measure along the curve of the spine, you're looking at something closer to 8¼ inches long or around 21 centimeters, and then he stands in at just under 3½ inches or 9 centimeters off of the ground. With Sinoceratops being roughly 20 feet long in life, that would put Achi here in that 1/27 scale range. PNSO's fluid poses make for some tricky measurements though, so if I'm a little off in that, please forgive me. Now let's do some size comparisons, always a favorite part of any video. I'm going to start off by bringing in some other Sinoceratops figures, and the most obvious first choice would be PNSO's baby version of Achi, and these two are obviously not in scale with one another. That'd be a big baby. Still, it's fun to see how PNSO have changed Achi from nestling to adult. The baby fat is all gone, as are the darker markings down the entire back of the infant figure, which may have provided young Achi a sort of camouflage-like protection. Now they are replaced with a more subtle coloration, and you can see how the horns have grown and changed as his flashy patterns came in. It's nice to see PNSO paid attention here and applied some well-thought-out ontogenetic changes rather than just doing a scaled-down, rounded version for their baby offering. Next up, for Sinoceratops comparisons, let's bring in the Vitae offering, which I recently reviewed on the channel as part of my 12 days of reviews. If you caught that video, then you know I was kinda lukewarm to that figure and still largely am. I appreciate the uniqueness of its color, but when you see the two side by side and have the sort of general rough texture of the Vitae offering compared to the crisp skin and scale work of PNSO's, there's honestly very little competition between the two. And of course, here it is with some Jurassic World style Sinos. First up, we've got the Nanmu offering Tower Shield, and yeah, this makes it quite hard to ignore the similar aesthetics between the PNSO offering and the version from Jurassic World. It's a classic copy your homework but change it just enough idea. Still, it is always fun to see movie counterparts compared to their real-world inspirations in model form. And for you Mattel fans, here it is with the Soundstrike Sinoceratops, one of my favorite offerings from the company from the past year, and you can see that Achi is absolutely dwarfed by that big old toy. Now for more PNSO comparisons. First, gotta bring in some other Ceratopsians. Here it is with Duke the Spinops, a decent enough figure from their 2019 lineup, but you can just see how different the style in between years is. I don't know what happened with PNSO in the time between these figures, but it's just a night and day difference here, with Duke having a much more basic and smooth appearance than Achi's highly detailed execution. And then of course here is Achi with Doyle the Triceratops. Doyle was part of the museum lineup and as such cost a lot more than the prehistoric animal range. As expected though, the detail and paint on him were much higher in quality than the cheaper figures of that time. But now it seems that PNSO is delivering affordable figures with the same level of quality as their museum line, and that is just awesome to see that level of work being all the more accessible. And next up, let's bring in the recently reviewed Rosanna the Miragaya by PNSO, probably the most objectively lovely figure they released in their 2020 lineup, and you can see how these two size up next to one another. Then we have Ashu, the Chianzusaurus, and even though Achi isn't quite as long as that figure, he is nearly as tall, and any difference in size he makes up with in bulk. Then this is the comparison I was actually most excited for, sue me, it's Domingo the Carnotaurus, and this is a particularly fun comparison because now you can recreate that scene from Fallen Kingdom in a more scientific manner. I know scientifically speaking it would never have happened to begin with, but come on, it's cool to see it in an accurate light, and the poses are actually quite conducive for it, so maybe there was some planning for it on PNSO's part. I don't know. Next up, we have Essie and the Spinosaurus 2.0, which was the first of the later 2020 PNSO releases I took a look at, and like with Ashu, Achi is on pretty equal ground when it comes to height and bulk, but isn't nearly as long. And then here's the token T-Rex comparison, Wilson the Tyrannosaurus by PNSO, their 2020 version of the original mold, and again, this shows that PNSO have managed to start producing smaller and more affordable figures with the quality of their higher end sculpts, which is awesome to see. And of course, here is Achi with the massive Huanga Titan by PNSO, just because it is awesome. And that was Achi, PNSO's new, fully grown Sinoceratops model. I'm yet to review a new PNSO figure that I do not like on this channel, and I'm happy to say that Achi here does not break the streak. He is another very well done model from PNSO that proves just how far they have come as a company. The figure features top of the line sculptural details with a beautiful paint job, all on a wonderfully unique and lifelike pose. I do have some issues with it, particularly on the head, the focal area of the piece, and because of that, I don't think it quite makes the cut for Dynamite. Still, I definitely dig it and say it's currently the best option out there for a scientific representation of this species. As always, I want to know what you guys think of this model. Do you own it yet? Are you planning on picking it up? What is your favorite version of Sinoceratops out there? And what Ceratopsian are you hoping PNSO will do next? Personally, I'm hoping for a Cosmoceratops. Drop a comment down below on your way out, and thank you so much for tuning in to today's review. I hope you enjoyed it, and I hope to see you again next time. Until then, take care out there, and bye-bye.